hard work, determination, taking massive risks, making sacrifices. I've made so many sacrifices along the way. And, I just hope that, the sacrifices would pay off.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 1 of the Slow Smoked Business Podcast. I'm your host, Jarrod Morgan, joined by Franklin Hayes. And for episode 1, we wanted to first start and tell you a little bit about who we are, which is going to lead up into our first guest. Franklin and I were a part of a company called ProctorU. This was a company that I actually started. I was the founder of in 2008 that created a way for people to take tests online without having to go to a campus or a test center, and using webcams and live people, allowing them to test right where they were, on their couch, at their kitchen table, wherever they were comfortable with. Now, I co-founded this company with a guy named Matt Jaeh, who's our first guest on this episode today, and I'm really excited about it. ProctorU went on to become Measure Learning, which is now the largest online testing company in the world, and we're really excited to have Matt here today to talk about how do you identify a partner or a person that you can start a project with, that you can actually build something with, and how do you learn that you can trust them?
So welcome everybody to today's show. We've got a great guest lined up for you guys. He's actually a good friend of Jarrod and I that go way back. That's Mr. Matt Jaeh. I often describe this guy as the smartest person that I know. He is one of the co-founders for ProctorU. He served as its Chief Technical Officer for many years. And before that, he actually took a really big risk, leaving a great job with Best Buy's Geek Squad, where he was in charge of all of Southern California. And he moved from Los Angeles cross country to little old Birmingham, Alabama, to join what at the time was a really small startup. And we went on to build this great company called ProctorU that is now part of Measure Learning. So everybody, want to welcome Mr. Matt Jaeh to the show.
Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Jarrod. Thanks, Franklin.
I was making the joke. This is like a home game, right? Couldn't find a friendlier face for episode 1. Frank gave a brief kind of background there, co-founder of ProctorU, also Alabama CIO of the Year a couple years ago. What year was that?
Yeah, 19.
Feels like a lifetime ago, right?
I know. Isn't that crazy how that works? Like, just crazy. Like all this too, and this whole pandemic thing has just been, this is the new normal, right? Like, this feels like the way it's like talking online like this.
It is. Feels a lot more natural than it used to. I think you also actually, just a couple of weeks ago, won 40 under 40 at the University of Florida. Is that right?
I did. It was fantastic to be back in Gainesville. It's incredible to see how much that place has changed. Like all the hot spots, like some of them are there, some of them aren't. Like if you look across from where Chrysler was, like the fountain is gone. There's like all this construction everywhere. And yeah, it's gone. And Leonardo's Pizzas, like that's gone. It's just like a lot. And then diagonal from that, there used to be some stuff there. It's like this gigantic high rise with a Target and everything. It's crazy. Butler Plaza is blown up. It's this huge thing. But it's all progress. I mean, it was cool. It was awesome to be back there. The Gator Nation is live and strong. That field though, man, it was awesome to be out there, to look around from the stadium, to see like, all right, yes, the swamp. I'm back. I'm home.
It's probably worth mentioning. This is only episode 1, but you're probably going to have one of the most interesting backgrounds behind you for anybody on this show. You've got a menagerie of guitars, like a Gator guitar on the top. Matt says he calls you the smartest guy, and I would agree with that. But you're also, I always made the joke, you're like the most interesting man, and like a multifaceted musician, entrepreneur, triathlete, all sorts of stuff. So I don't know how much we're going to delve into any of that stuff, but what I was hoping we could do today, this is why you're the perfect first guest. A lot of people listening and watching this show online, they don't actually know the full story of how why are these guys talking about entrepreneurship.
Just gonna take a whole series, Jarrod. Like, if you want to do that, man.
The director's cut. But I was hoping you would help us maybe go rewind the clock and tell the story of how we got here, how tell our entrepreneurship story, how we created a company called ProctorU. would you like to launch into it, or would you like me to tee you up? And maybe it would be good for you to give your side of it, of the starting thing, kind of tell where this came from.
Yeah, so I remember way back. I mean, I was in LA at the time, and you and I had always just kept in touch ever since Gainesville. And um, man, I have to like peel back through, some of the old emails and I guess blog things and like kind of see where my mind was at that time. But and I distinctly remember we were talking about this opportunity that you had gotten while working at Andrew Jackson University to create this social media for study groups.
Oh, you're going that far back.
I think that's the origin, right? Because we're gonna roll ProctorU into Pupil City as a feature.
Yeah, Pupil City it was called.
Yeah, to drive, like, it was one of the monetization like mechanisms for Pupil City, along with electronic textbooks and like ad revenue and everything else. But proctoring was a service that was to be incorporated as part of Pupil City, and so that was a side gig.
Right. Well, the theme of Pupil City was to try to create a centralized place where students could go and study in common subjects, right? And it's interesting when you talk about things like a lot of these ideas we had years ago, they seem silly now because there's like a million sites that are trying to do that. But at the time, there was really nothing, no sort of social networking was really new. And so it was a novel idea to try to bring students together. Sometimes I forget to sort of think about ProctorU as kind of a pivot. It kind of was a pivot, right? I mean, we started this social network thing for students, and then it just wasn't really going anywhere. There wasn't a lot of interest in it, but we had also created this tool for the university that I was working for to use to test people, to allow people to take tests without having to leave their home. So we created this thing using a webcam. And, I was a decent computer science student at Florida, right? So I kind of like put a little something together.
That's right.
Decent. Not award-winning 40 under 40 like Matt Jaeh, but I created something that worked, and it was going pretty well. But as it started to grow, and it quickly outpaced what we were doing, really anything else that we were doing, I needed to pull in somebody that had a tech background to actually make this thing real, make it a fully fleshed out product. And so I called, the guy that I had been using on the side, like he's been helping me a lot. And I called Matt here, who had a great life going in Los Angeles. This guy, he had a wife, young wife who was pregnant. They're living in LA. He's in a rock band that he plays. So at nights he's playing in a rock band on like the Sunset Strip. During the day, he's like a regional manager with Best Buy's Geek Squad. Like he's being invited to all these kind of upper level conversations. And then here I am, I call him and I go, hey, that little startup that actually couldn't afford to pay me like a couple of weeks ago? What do you think about joining full time? And the question I want to ask, this is, I think, be really good for users to hear. How do you get the guts to take a risk like that and move across I call it the reverse Beverly Hillbilly, right? It was, you went from LA to the country. How do you get the guts to take what was a pretty comfortable life with a clear path forward and blow it up and move over and take a giant risk for a startup?
Well, that's one of those things that, when and now that I've been working with a lot of different startups and looking at their journey, and just like you guys read a ton of books about success and what drives people and what the meaning of that is. And, read Luke Breimer's book, and, it's about hustle and hard work, but you just nailed it, right? So success is the hard work, like the hustle, just like Luke talked about. Everyone talks about hard work, right? That's like a given. But then there's the risk, and then there's also what you're willing to sacrifice. And you just talked a little bit about that, right? And so at that point in time, yeah, I was doing fairly well. I had a clear path to either most likely become successful in a corporate sense, moving up that corporate ladder with Best Buy. And I had a couple other various startup things. The music thing, quite honestly, like at that point in time, it was dying down a little. I was producing some stuff for TV and film, little stuff here and there, little small wins. Wasn't making that much. The band stuff was still like just barely. I mean, I'm in and out of bands. Like Franklin knows what that's like. And out in LA, yeah, it sounds glamorous that you're playing Viper Room, the Roxy, and all these places on the Sunset Strip. But the truth of the matter is that you got to pay to play these places. You got to bring your crowds out there, and it's like this economic like nightmare. And a lot of times you go to these clubs, yeah, you got to sell these tickets, and you go out to these clubs, and you're playing to the bartender, and then at 1 o'clock in the morning, you got to haul all your crap, all that heavy stuff back there down like 2, 3 flights of stairs, walk through snow. This the story, right? It's just like, all right.
You're jacking with my vision of how cool your life was, by the way. This is messing with my head.
This is about slow smoke business, right? And this is about the ingredients, about what it takes to become successful. I think, right? I think this is the opportunity you guys have to talk about. That it's not all like glamorous and glitzy or whatever and whatever. And same thing for me, man. It's just like hard work, determination, taking massive risks, making sacrifices. I've made so many sacrifices along the way. And, I just hope that, the sacrifices would pay off. Going back to your question, what motivated me to make that jump? There's a lot of different things. One of the main things that I found out, that I've come to realize after our ordeal and working with the startups, is that you have to intimately trust the people that you work with. I don't care like what the idea is. If you can trust the people that you work with, and you can do just about anything with these people. I feel that way about you three. Like, I trust you guys. I would work with you guys again. And that's what really matters when it comes to startup. You can't do this stuff alone. You need help. I don't care who you are, if you're the most interesting man in the world, the most read, the smartest, whatever that may be. You have to be smart enough to know that you can't do friggin' everything, and that there are people that can do things way better than you can do, right? And you put the pieces together. I think you did that too, Jarrod, right? Like, you're good with tech, but you're great with friggin' sales and strategy and marketing. That's your secret sauce. I'm great with tech, solving problems, coming up with crazy ideas on how to solve these problems. Execution, that's what I do. And so you realized that early on. I realized that. I know that we could work together. And I knew that if we both grind like super like hard, all in, like that's what I did, right? That's what I realized. You have to go all in. You want it to be successful? You got to sacrifice. You got to go all in. And that's what we did. And that's what I realized that you were willing to do, and I was willing to do it too. And because we had this understanding of how we would work together, that was like a no-brainer to me. I know whatever we would do, we would make it successful, because we were going all in, baby, all in.
I mean, yeah, we sold it all to go in there, and it was, rice and beans and stuff to kind of make things work for a while. But I mean, so you touched on something I thought was really interesting. So how do you, a lot of people that are starting a project, I 100% believe in what you say. I couldn't imagine starting a project or a company without building a tribe of believers and doers around you. And so how do you think about, I mean, you and I had an advantage in the sense that we had known each other for a long time, but how do you find people?
I'll tell you what, Jarrod, most of these people that are starting these companies, they don't find the right people to begin with. And they're like, I'm stuck. So what they do, and how do you find the right people? Like it's challenging, right? So they do it just like you do with any other thing, right? You kind of get yourself out there, handshakes, meet tons of people, join accelerators, incubators, apply for programs, put themselves out on various sites on the internet, like the YC Combinator, like matchmaker stuff. And they try to find people. They go to meetups, local meetups around town, people that are, out there looking. So a lot of times what I see are visionaries looking for technical co-founders. That's probably the biggest one. Because there's a lot of ideas out there, but it's difficult to find out how to actually implement and execute those ideas.
So you see a lot of people that have their idea guys, but they lack the doer, the technical guy.
Yes, that is far and away the biggest thing that I see out there right now. So the cohorts that I work with, luckily most of them, they've kind of figured that piece out, and they have somebody that they can go to for a technical questions, where they've surrounded themselves with good mentors, good people that they can do. And that's what I suggest too for co-founders, non-technical co-founders. If you can't find that right partner, surround yourself with people that are willing to help you out and be mentors and help you not make some of those same mistakes that, like, even we made coming up, right? That can make a huge difference. Take the time to find the right person that works with you. These people are going to be with you more than your family. When you think about it, at the end of the day, the three of us spent more time farting in a single room, like just grinding, than we spent with our own families. Like, you've got to be comfortable in being able to do that first and foremost.
So when somebody that you're working with in one of these cohorts that you're working with comes to you and says, I'm looking for a technical co-founder, what kind of advice can you give them when they have somebody and they're trying to evaluate if this guy is the one? It's harder than dating in some respects, right? Because it's a little more transparent in dating. You sort of you sort of know what you're looking for, and you can feel things out. And also, like, there's a half step to date. Like, you can date for a little while and then, this is not working out. It's harder to do that when you're trying to start a company with somebody. So what kind of advice do you give to people when they think they've identified a partner, but they're not sure?
Well, I think first and most, we talked about that ability to vibe with the other person. I mean, you've got to be able to work with this person through thick and thin, good times, bad times, and be able to understand and come to some sort of understanding and agreement during all of these challenging situations that you undoubtedly will encounter throughout this journey. And then, from the kind of technical perspective, I think it's more about, can this person learn and adapt and solve for the types of problems that you're going to encounter? Because you're not going to find, unless it's some known problem that you're going to solve, right? You're going to find somebody that can think on the fly and solve for these problems, these technical challenges or whatever. And if it is like a known type of problem that you're trying to solve, like, for example, if you're technology enabled versus technology driven, then you might be better off going, having a really strong mentor network and using consultants, and just, keeping as much equity as possible as a founder, and maybe not even worry about having a co-founder, or a CTO, or whatever that may look like, until you have reached a size of scale, or really starting to grow, either on your way to your Series A or post Series A, because your investors have been like, all right, you've rolled this far, that's great, but you need somebody now, right?
Now, speaking of some of the past history that we have at ProctorU, Matt, what do you think was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome during your roughly decade and a half there? What was the biggest thing that you had to work through?
Oh man, there's so many challenges that we encountered. I would say the biggest one is the pushing yourself through the various growth inflection points, whereas you realize that what you did, that worked successfully a couple months ago, maybe even a year ago, as you got bigger, is just no longer good enough. It's just not, it doesn't work. And you have to do some drastic changes and move really fast, and try to chart the right course when it comes to whatever is needed to be successful. And what's difficult about that is not just the change or the challenge of the change, but it's also the impact of what it does to the people around you that you work with. Because people are adverse to change. And what hurts is to see these people that you grew up with in the trenches, that grinded and worked super hard with you, for you, however that may be, and quite aren't along for the ride, or they just don't get it. And to see those kinds of people like fall out from the business, that's challenging, man. That's tough.
We
It's
had a lot
tough.
of those like inflection points with
Yeah,
ProctorU, right? I mean,
yeah,
we had
we did, and some people rolled through those changes, and some people unfortunately didn't. You know,
it's painful, but you can't always. I've always said when you have to try to have a level of trust with the people that you work with, and one of the things that I've always said is like, how do you figure out how to trust people? Is you gotta really understand what somebody wants. What do they really want? Some people are motivated by solving interesting problems, and some people are motivated by personal growth, and some people are motivated by money, and some people are motivated by exposure. And once you sort of understand what a person really wants, then you can sort of understand them and where they're going, and it helps you kind of trust them a little more when they get into a situation. Well, this person is looking for this kind of thing, or this is probably how they're going to react there. But you get to inflection points where there's some really great people that you're working with, and then you have an inflection point in a business where everything changes. You got maybe you got a new set of bosses, or new investors, or a new market that you're tackling, and those same people may not be the ones that move you into the next phase. And that's for me, that was probably the most difficult element of entrepreneurship of all, was realizing that the people that were there with me in the trenches in this phase are not necessarily going to be the people that are there in the next phase, and that that's okay. It took me a long time to realize that that was okay, and it wasn't some kind of failure on my part or on the organization's part. There's just, people. I like the way I've heard it said, Masters of Scale says this a lot. You do tours of duty, right? Sometimes you think of your career in tours of duty, and someone did a tour of duty with us in the early phase, and it made a lot of sense then. And then it kind of, when we get to another one, maybe the next tour doesn't make sense for that person.
yeah, that's well said. That's well said, and I think that summarizes that question that you're asking me, Franklin, about that one of the largest challenges. But I mean, there's probably other ones, Jarrod and Franklin, that come to mind too. But that's the one that kind of stuck, right now in the moment.
Well, certainly in the early days, overcoming lack of resources was a difficult one.
Yeah, and lack of resources, though. There's always a lack of resources. Always. I don't care how big you get. There's always a lack of resources.
Well, Frank, so one thing, I mean, we've said the story of how Matt and I sort of came together in the early days, and we could do probably 6 episodes at least on the art of finding your co-founder and the person that you can trust, and it's about trust, and it's about skill sets, alignment. Matt and I are different. We're very different, and that's why we worked really well together. Is because he can do a lot of things that I can't. I can do a lot of things that he doesn't do. He can do a lot of things that I do. But we had different skill sets, right? But if you go like a step further, so once Matt and I got together, like we had to kind of find almost like employee number one, right? Or one of the first employees, and that's what led us to Franklin, right? And so there's another art of going and finding like employee one. And to me, what drew us to Franklin, and then people like Franklin afterwards, was like, you want to find somebody who's a believer and who's hungry. And that was the big thing with Franklin. Like, he was coming from the same sort of background that we had, coming from a city in Pensacola, Florida, which I love dearly, but there wasn't like a thriving startup scene in Pensacola at the time. And the interest to sort of leave what you know and throw yourself all the way in to do something, because that's really what it takes if you're going all in on a startup. You want to find that employee one that will throw themselves into the mission the same way that the founders are. And that's kind of what we found with Frank, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Me personally, I was at the end of one chapter and really eager to start the next chapter. So I was at that perfect inflection point in my own personal life that kind of led me there. And Jarrod, to steal something that you've said a ton of times is, step one is, finding people to get on the bus with you, which is what we're talking about. And then the next phase of that was kind of moving people around so that they're on the right seat on the right bus. which was another, interesting challenge by itself.
Franklin, I just wanted you on the bus, buddy. You and I have been friends like forever. So,
And for the record, full disclosure, I'm pretty sure I lifted that from a book somewhere. I just don't remember what book it was. So
You can't honestly go around calling me employee number one, because I think Amanda Heilman is holder of that record.
that's true. I mean, the truth is, ours is a little bit different. We had a lot of part-time folks. I think you may have been the first like full-time guy, maybe. I think so. But we built the original operation around you and your dedication and your willingness to sort of be up there. Again, we proctored tests. We had real people interacting with students, watching them take tests. And so we had to be, we weren't 24 hours yet, but we had to be, there every day, solving problems. This test isn't launching. This person has a question. This person's computer is smoking and shaking, and we got to figure out how to fix it. That's probably, a startup is just an endless series of problem solving. And so I think that's another thing. When you identify the people that you want to work with, you need to go find people who are good problem solvers and are willing to admit that they don't have all the answers. And I'd ask you guys, for me, if I asked you what character traits were consistent with the people that lasted for a long time, I would say it would be people that were okay not having all the answers, but willing to go find them, right? If you look at the people that made it through a lot of chapters through, this decade plus growth with us in this company, it was problem solvers and people that weren't so arrogant or weren't so, had to be right. They wanted to kind of go find the right answer.
yeah, it's about thinking outside of the box. I mean, that I think is one of the things that I look for when I was hiring folks, is that could these people solve problems and think outside the box? We were innovating and pioneering an industry. There was no one doing exactly what we were doing at the time. People were copying us. I mean, the closest thing was Criterion, and they weren't even ready when we were launching all around the same time, and they had a different approach when it came to proctoring. Right, they had their own test delivery provider, and they were centering their solution around the test delivery system, which is not a bad approach, but it hurts adoption and hurts scale when you're trying to go with a cool and innovative strategy like planting flags everywhere, right?
Well, I was about finding what the market was open to. I mean, the market all kind of went that way. I think a lot of companies were just, tackled the problem in a way that the market wasn't ready for yet. At the time, we were fortunate in that what the market was ready for was small adoptions of, low tech, not a lot of like, oh, you got to download and install all this stuff. And so, yeah, that plant the flag strategy was really critical, because what we did was we were willing at the time to take a school or a class or whatever, no matter how small, because it got us on a campus. It got us another set of believers, people going, yeah, actually, this was great. Like, I took my test at home. And I think that's critical for any startup, right? You got to start building your tribe of users and get your early fans. And that's really what we did, I think, very well, was get a lot of small wins and start raking them together into what became, momentum.
That's right. Product market fit. That's one of the main indicators that I work with the startups with to try to establish, is that product market fit. That is critical. And you described it to a T.
So Matt, as you're working with Innovation Depot and your community to help these innovators and entrepreneurs get started, what are the three major things that you think every entrepreneur should really have under control?
What stage do you think you're talking about here? Are we talking about ideation stage? We're talking about they've got an MVP, or they're working on MVP, they're post MVP, they're pre-revenue but have an MVP. Are they post? Are they slightly post revenue? Are they what stage? Because it's at various stages of the entrepreneur game, there's those three most important things, change dramatically, right? So you got to think about it like that. That you gotta crawl before you can walk, and then you gotta walk before you can run, and then so forth. and the entrepreneur journey in these various stages, the most important things. It's funny. I think I have PTSD when it comes to hearing about the most important things. But,
Well, that brings up a good point too. Do you think there's any one specific path for people to go from an idea on a whiteboard all the way to, mid-sized corporate success? Like, or because I know how you think. I'm kind of asking you this question with a little bit of personal bias, Matt. I know that you like to have very specific systems. You're very left brain. So I'm curious if you find that there is a specific pattern that makes the most sense for people, or is it really just like the Jarrod style, just get it done and see what happens? Like, is it somewhere kind of in the middle?
no, there's no pattern. There's no specific patterns to success. Just like with anything, and that's why like these types of podcasts and like self-help type things and weight loss type things and systems are also popular, is because there is no one thing that fits all in this situation with business, with like your personal whatever that may be. There is no one size fits all. It's what resonates with you, and what works for you doesn't work for everybody. And so I think what a lot of people do when they're on this journey to try to either expand themselves, better themselves, whatever that may be, they absorb all of this types of this information, right, from podcasts like this, reading books, talking to people, and then hopefully they're going to find something that really resonates with them and that works for them, or they're going to discover that system or method for themselves. In my experience, I have not found I don't think there's anyone that you could say like, oh, there's a 100% guaranteed you do this and you're going to be successful. If you hear somebody saying that, they're selling you snake oil. I would say no, man.
I agree. I won't name names, but I sat through a presentation recently of somebody giving this framework, and they'd written a little book and everything about like, if you will follow this format for your startup to a T, guaranteed success, right? And so this person starts going through these steps, and I was there with some folks that I had worked in, one of our former CEOs, and guy I'd worked with a lot, Scott McFarlane, was there, and I'm looking at him, and he's sort of looking at me, and we're going, I don't know if you can prescribe it. That is so much that you have to. There's so many X factors that you have to, to figure out. It's never clean. That's what I think people don't get, and that's what I'm hoping to give through this podcast. Is like, tell our story and have other people tell their stories. But there is no one path. It's not clean. It's never going to be this neat little tidy, like we started it and then it grew and then it grew a little more and then it grew. It's a winding path with problems and like near extinction events every time you turn around, and like crazy things that you've never considered. I mean, we built a proctoring company, and then had to get really good at predicting hurricanes as they threatened our offices, and then had to adapt to like pandemics, and you just never know what you're going to get. And all those things can mean success or failure. So you're right. There is no path. There is no one path. There is a set of skills that you can teach yourself that will help you adapt to whatever crazy curveball this story is going to throw you.
Like, think about this. Bring us back to barbecue, Jarrod. I think out of all the three of us, you're the first one who really embraced cooking barbecue, right? And then it was me, and then I think Franklin.
This is going to take a turn. This episode is going to take a turn.
The methods that you used to first create barbecue on your electric smoker.
Oh my God, yes.
You wouldn't do that again. Like, you wouldn't do that.
This kid, I'm gonna get run out of this. I'm gonna get run out of Bama and Texas.
Yeah, there's no way you'd do that now, right? But you learned a lot from that, and now you realize too. And then Franklin, and now I think you're in the modern age now with better smoking technology and doing all that stuff. You can have like the most perfect recipe. I bet you could get like Franklin's barbecue recipe, like the Franklin and Austin Franklin's, and still not be able to make it.
Yeah, not this particular Franklin barbecue.
And still not be able to make brisket like that person can.
That will show you exactly how to do it, but that doesn't mean 12 hours later you're going to have good brisket.
Oh yeah, that doesn't mean it. And so I think people, and I watch a ton of YouTube videos about about like, oh, how do you make Franklin's brisket? And it's like, oh, do you use the Wagyu beef tallow like at a certain point and like in the cook and all this stuff? It's the same thing. And what we're talking about here is just like, yeah, you can have all these like tips and things, but man, it doesn't mean you're going to have success.
So, Matt, if you were going to start over, right, rewind the clock, you're back in your 20s, and you got to pick some partners, and you can't pick the partners that you had for your rides. You got to pick new ones. What would you do to figure out whether or not the person that you're talking to is the one that you can actually build a meaningful company with?
Yeah, that's one of those things, right? So I think it's centered. We talked initially about this. So you've got a problem and you want to solve it. And so you got to find the right people that can help you solve that problem. So first off, it's about knowing yourself. Like how do you solve problems? How do you see the world? What problems do you think you might need to solve? And how would you solve them? And are there people out there that could solve them better, that understand your vision, right? Um, and that's kind of just talking about the problem space. But even more importantly is, do you mesh with this person? Does this person work with you? Can you deal with this person through thick and thin, through adversity, challenges? Because you're not always going to see eye to eye. And when that happens, what happens? Are you guys going to, I don't know, get into a fist fight? Or, you know, are you guys going to be able to talk it through and come up with a solution in the end? So for me, it's the latter, right? You got to be able to talk to this person and hopefully come to some sort of solution. And I think being able to find someone like that is the critical piece. You have to be able to find somebody that is complements you in the way that you understand that they have some strengths that you don't necessarily have, and that they are in the mindset similar enough to you. Whereas when you get into these situations that where you're not going to agree, that you'll be able to find a solution in the end.
It's hard to build anything without the right kind of people around you. And sometimes it's hard to know, it's hard to figure out how people solve problems so you actually get into the problems. I mean, for me, it was always trying to find being, my superpower is being really honest about what I'm not good at, right? And so finding people that were good at the things that I wasn't good at was always like table stakes, right? You're trying to build a functional team around you of people that do the things. Franklin, way more detail oriented than I could, writes really well. All these little things that were a struggle for me. You put a tribe of people around you that all have sort of complementary skills. That's how you can build something that can really make a difference and actually create something.
That's exactly right.
One of my big takeaways from this conversation is, given that the environment we were in was constantly evolving and adapting and changing, it was a matter of really never getting to that point of being comfortable and getting a little bit lazy. So now all three of us are kind of headed into new chapters, post ProctorU, post Measure Learning. So what does that look like for you, Matt? Like, what are some of the things that you're looking for to get involved with next, or what are some of the things that you've been up to since Measure Learning?
Yeah, so the main thing that I've been doing is I'm kind of in give back mode right now. During the decade of operating with ProctorU, I was like heads down, just grinding. And now that I'm stepped away from that, I realized that I want to be, I didn't really interface with the local community like I probably should have. I didn't build a lot of relationships and give back the way that I probably should have while coming up. And so I want to pay that forward. And that's why I've been doing a lot of these things with startups and mentoring, coaching, and developing, working with Innovation Depot. So I want to be able to do that. And along the way, I've met some of the most incredible, talented people. And it's just humbling to see like all these awesome people doing these really, really cool things. And I've passed up some opportunities, and I think that's okay. Like at this point, I talked earlier about the hard work, the risks, and the sacrifices that it takes to become successful. And I sacrificed time away from family, um, relationships, even my own personal health initially. So, like, you guys know that I was the freaking fat ass. Like, when I first joined ProctorU and I saw myself and I was like, holy crap, for that year, I was like, this is not good. So, I'd sacrificed personal health. So, I immediately like reprioritized what was important to me and was like, all right, health has got to be number one box. Cause like, if I'm not healthy, none of it is going to work. Like none of it's going to work. So number one. So now that I've got this, we've earned this, we've collectively earned this, this time back and these resources, whatever next endeavor that I decide to do is probably going to take a back seat to family and personal health. Now that's like personal health, family, and then whatever else. So I've made sacrifices while doing ProctorU. I didn't get to see some things that, my 10-year-old did growing up. I have those opportunities now with the 4-year-old. So I'm not going to miss any of those moments. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be able to hang out. I'm going to be able to do all those things that I missed out on. And whatever comes next, whatever that may be, it can wait until they're older, and then I can settle. Same thing like when I did Ironman too. I realized, because I see a lot of people who do Ironman all the time, and that's awesome. But it takes so much time and so much dedication in order to do that. I told myself after I did one, I was like, I'm not going to do this until my kids are like way older. It can wait. Same thing for like whatever that may be, if it's earth changing or whatever that may be, opportunity wise. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to do anything. I'll continue to do all things and find opportunities. I bet you out there is some Goldilocks opportunity that kind of meets the balance between my goals and what I want for now. So that's the balance between, taking care of myself, taking care of my family, and then everything else. But that's most likely not going to be an early stage startup, because early stage startups need that all-in dedication. I mean, you need to be able to take that risk. You need to be able to make those sacrifices. So it's probably not going to be something like that this go around or for the next couple of years. I mean, think about it. With my oldest, I've got 4, maybe 5 years of time left with him until, dad's not cool anymore. And then with my 4-year-old, I've got 10, 11 more years until dad's not cool anymore. So in the pantheon of things, that's not that long to wait.
Well, thank you, Matt, for being here on episode 1 of the Slow Smoke Business Podcast. I have a strong suspicion this is probably not your last episode here. You've just got, there's like a rich history here. There's so much to tell. Enjoyed having you here, and we'll have you back soon.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a pleasure, man. And I'm so proud of both of you guys. Like, it's been an awesome ride.